There we go. Welcome everyone to Metasploit 101. How many of you guys have used Metasploit before? Raise your hand if you've opened Metasploit. Okay. Now keep your hand up if you've run a payload in Metasploit before. Okay. Now keep it up if the payload worked. All right. So for you guys, you can leave. This class isn't for you. This is 101. We're trying to get the payload to work. That's our goal. No, you can stay.
Why do all the hackers sit at the back of the room?
He's not a hacker, he's the opposite.
No, I'm not a hacker. You know that.
So, my name is bashNinja, for those who don't know. But my name isn't the first name on the slides, mostly because I didn't build these slides. Santiago did. So he built these slides for SaintCon, which is a local security conference here in Utah. They do it down in Provo usually. He did a 2-hour workshop, and so we're just going to get a shortened version of that workshop. We get the first half. The second half you have to bug Santiago for. So before we get started, just letting you know, there's the disclaimer. Metasploit is a hacking tool. It wasn't made to be a hacking tool, it's made to be a pen testing tool, but it does allow you to hack and get into servers. So please don't break the law, do it responsibly, ask for permission, don't go to jail, because you can. All these training materials are available on Santiago's GitHub. So the slides, he's got a really good set of notes. It's basically a written version of his workshop, so if you want to go see Section 2, go look at his notes. And I'll post a link to this in the Discord at the end of the class. And it's really good. And if you have more questions, bug him, not me. No, I'd love to help out. So who am I? My name is bashNinja, or Mike Weaver. I've been a DC 801 Labs member for 5 years now. So it's been a while. Somehow they decided to put me on the board because I wanted to sit in meetings. That's pretty much all I do there. You guys make the hackerspace happen. Professionally, I work as a security incident responder. I work at Adobe at the point of the mountain. Basically, my job is to respond to, if someone's using Metasploit and it works, it's my job to fix it. I'm also a co-founder with a guy named Austin Larson of the UVU Cybersecurity Club. I'm married, I have 2 kids, 3.5 horses, and I love building home labs. So many of you have probably seen this slide before, but it's pretty much me in a nutshell. There's a lot more, but that's it. So what are we going to go over today? Well, we're going to go over part 1, and I put maybe when I was building the slides. No, we might get there, depends on how fast we get there, but probably we won't get to part 2. So this will be part 2 will be homework for you if you want to continue learning. So we'll go over, an introduction to pen testing. We're going to go over the Metasploit framework, using the console, and then, 4 little sections that I've got there. So let's just dive right into it. In part 1, these are the 3 goals that I have for this class, basically, is to answer these 3 questions and make sure that you know the answers. So during the class, take notes and try to remember, because I'm going to ask you these at the end. And they are, what is Metasploit? Why should I use it? And how do I use it? So remember, I'm going to ask you these 3 questions. What is it? Why? And how? Cool. So I told you that Metasploit was built as a hacking tool, but primarily for pen testers. So since this is a 101 class, I'm going to assume that not everyone knows what a pen test is. So let's start at the basics. What is a penetration test? Someone want to throw it out? What's a pen test? Go ahead.
A fake malicious actor, so someone who is hired to pretend to be a malicious actor, tries to hack and or otherwise infiltrate an organization and their resources to make sure that the company can secure them.
Okay, exactly. You're real close. I'm going to shorten it just a tad bit. But a pen test is somebody who is trying to find vulnerabilities in some computer system of some sort, cell phones, SCADA, normal server infrastructure, and most of the time they're paid to do it. So I have down here, it's really small so you're not going to read it, but I will tell you the site. There's a really good resource for learning more about pen testing. It's called Pen Test Standards. They're pentest-standard.org, and they define the steps of a pen test in these 3 sections, right? And so we know what a pen test is trying to hack a computer, but what is it really? Well, they broke it up into these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps. So they've got the pre-engagement, which is, them talking with the client or with whoever, making sure they have permission, making sure they get all the checks and balances done before they actually start the pen test. Then what they'll do is they'll try to gather intelligence. That's on their target, right? Then there's the threat modeling section, vulnerability analysis, exploitation, post-exploitation reporting. So the ones that we're going to focus on specifically are a bit of the intelligence gathering, a bit of the vulnerability analysis, and the exploitation and the post-exploitation.
I think you should focus on the first one.
The pre-engagement?
That's the one that almost got you kicked out of high school.
Shut up.
I think this sounds like a good story. Yeah, Bash, tell us your story.
I don't talk about that story publicly. When we turn off the recording, I'll tell you the story. Because what the school knows and what actually happened are different.
If we're gonna skip through the threat modeling and the deep dive, could we just briefly touch on what sort of tools you use for that and what that looks like in a nutshell?
Yeah, sure. So the threat modeling is really about trying to model the organization, and there's not really a good tool. I mean, there are, but a lot of it is just sitting down and doing research. What does the company do? What kind of services do they provide? Right? Where are their employees based? Are they based in just Utah? Are they based globally? Are they based on the East Coast, West Coast? What kind of data would that company normally have? Is it a financial company so they can have credit cards? Just kind of general gathering information about a target.
So you're not inherently scanning the network?
No. So specifically, that's the threat modeling that I'm talking about. Like, what are this
Gotcha.
company's threats? Like,
Gotcha.
what is something that would threaten this company?
Who might actually attack this company?
This intelligence gathering is what you're talking about with with like Nmap and those other scans, and we'll definitely get into that because Metasploit does do that.
Yeah.
So,
Cool. Thank you.
yeah. I guess I'll just talk about each of these. So the pre-engagement is kind of defining the scope and getting permission. Intelligence gathering is gathering information about the target's specific environment, usually things like scanning their network, scanning their available IPs, seeing what kind of services are publicly available. Threat modeling is more identifying the types of threats that those companies could get, like threat actors, things like that. Vulnerability analysis is identifying, what kind of vulnerabilities they have. So yes, they have these services open, but we now are analyzing these services, see, do they have vulnerabilities? Is this an old bit of software? If it is, is it vulnerable to X, Y, or Z? So that's an analyzing that. Then once you find a vulnerability, brings into exploitation, where you actually attack the box and execute the attack. Then you've got post-exploitation, which is after you have exploited that vulnerability, then what? Now you have remote code execution on a box. What do you do afterwards, right? And then reporting. And this is kind of the boring stuff, where you get to, at the end, write a big old report, a document, it'll probably take you a couple of days, and just detail everything that you did so you can provide that to the company so they can make their stuff better.
I've heard that the reporting step is better and is easier if you do it during all steps.
Yes, so taking notes of what you do during every phase of what you're doing will make that report at the end much easier to generate. Yeah, for sure. So I have these terms I'm going to use them a lot. These are a lot of, I don't know, it's 101, so you might not know what they are. A vulnerability, if you don't know what that is, we've talked about it. It's a weakness in a computer system. We talked about a penetration test, but a tester is a person who is performing that. An exploit is when you send an attack against a host that has a vulnerability in it. A payload is kind of the thing that you want to run after you've sent the exploit. So I would compare an exploit like a needle. You use the needle to penetrate your skin, right? And then the payload would be the stuff that you actually inject inside. So what happens after you've gotten through the security, right? A module is part of Metasploit, and we'll talk about that. It's just you've got different modules, different sections, and Metasploit's broken into a framework. So we'll talk more about those. And then a listener is, I've written a piece of software that waits for incoming connections, or something that just listens. Usually what happens is when you do an exploit and you snip a payload, a lot of times that payload will call back to your own machine. And so you will have a listener sitting on your machine waiting for someone to talk to you. And so you're exploiting a host, and that host's payload talks back to you so you can start communication. So that's kind of terminology. So let's go over Metasploit. Metasploit is a framework. So it's not just a collection of exploits. It's an entire framework around that happens to have some built-in exploits, right? And so it was built to automate and make running a pen test way easier. Funny enough, when Metasploit was released, everyone hated it. The security community hated it because they thought it was really not really trustworthy, and they thought it was sketchy, and it allowed script kiddies to start running exploits. The black hat community hated it because they were Metasploit was making it a lot easier for people, giving away a lot of their tools and things that they had done. And then the law enforcement hated it because they had no clue how to prosecute people with it. Like, do I prosecute the guy who built the tool? It was a mess, and it took many years for them to get past that. But I mean, so far now, it's become so standard that even universities it can be a requirement to graduate knowing how to use Metasploit. And so it's a really cool tool. So let's talk about some of these tools that are super important. I broke it up to these 7 phases. So it's broken down to these 7 phases, and what each of these tools will do. I have Metasploit, Nmap, and Mass Scan. So Metasploit can kind of do this intelligence gathering. That's the scanning part. But Nmap and Mass Scan are way better, and Nmap being my favorite once you have a list of ports. So Mass Scan is really fast. But Nmap has its scripting engine, which is amazing. And that's why it's got some partials on these next 2 steps, because of that scripting engine, right? Go ahead, question.
Describe why vulnerability analysis is only partial with Nmap.
So that was not Nmap's primary purpose,
Yeah.
right? So it was not built primarily to check for vulnerabilities. It was built to scan for things, and then it has a scripting engine on the back end that say, once I've scanned things, if they match certain parameters, let's run 1 or 2 of these scripts, right? And you can build vulnerability analysis into those scripts, but not very many things have them, and that wasn't its primary purpose. It was just built to run scripts at the end.
All right.
So that's why it's a partial on both vulnerability analysis and exploitation, is because that's not its primary goal. Now, Metasploit's primary goal was very much to do vulnerability analysis, exploitation, and post-exploitation. That's what it's all about. It kind of has some of this intelligence gathering. It's partial, but it's not a huge focus for it because they expect you to use better tools like Nmap. So there are 2 components to this Metasploit framework that we're going to cover today. So this is the console that we're going to get access to, which is Metasploit, and then there's Meterpreter, which is a common payload and way of talking to that payload. You can look at we will get into these other components, but I'm not going to talk about them right now. So specifically, I want to use the console. Now, this is where we're going to actually start to use Metasploit. So I'm going to pull this slide down and mirror screens real quick. There we go. So we've got the console. So you guys, I don't know how many of you saw the description, but hopefully we have downloaded the files. Who has downloaded the files that I asked people to do beforehand? Raise your hand. Who has not is a better question.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna
FYI,
go ahead.
The Samba's ready.
Okay, so we have a couple ways to distribute these files because one of these is gonna probably crash and burn. Let's see, F11. So what is the IP for the Samba share?
192.168.40.213.
Okay,
40.213.
192.168.40.13.
Yeah, /share.
Oh, /share.
Or backslash, I guess, on Windows.
So that is on the server network. Do we have access to that?
Crap.
Can you make a firewall real quick?
Just add a quick firewall rule,
Yeah. Can you do that for me real quick?
Yeah.
Using Unify. So the other option is I have flash drives.
I forgot about my access.
So what we need to grab, let me show you real quick the files that we need. Because you might already have them. So we're going to install two things. We're going to install Kali Linux on our machines in a virtual machine, and then we're also going to install Metasploitable, which is a vulnerable operating system. Question.
This might be old news, but if I remember correctly, there is a website we can go to that will spin up.
Yeah, I will get to that in a minute. We'll talk about Chasm in just a second.
Yeah, Cassie.
All right. For those on the Discord, we have links in the events channel that you can just download them yourself. But if you don't have these files, I'm going to start handing these flash drives around, and I need you to copy them from here. I mean, we'll have the network share working in just a second. So, we need a virtual machine system, either VirtualBox or VMware. And so what you do is here, I'll make it bigger.
I actually already have it. Yeah.
I'm running a bare metal.
So you'll grab this file here,
Honestly, never.
this metasploitable.zip. Everyone needs this one. And then based on your virtual machine,
So,
you will grab this other one. If you have VirtualBox, use the one that says VirtualBox in it. If you have VMware, grab the one that says VMware. Okay? While we do that, let's talk about Chasm. So we've been testing a Chasm server. Let's see if it'll work. / I think it's cast? No.
I think that you need no pound, just the URL /cast.
URL /cast. No. So yeah, I don't think Chasm will, let's see. Let me set up Chasm real quick. So I'm going to,
It's chasm / Kali.
okay,
/pound
slash,
/ Kali or / chasm / Kali. Cas,
I
sorry.
guess, or you.
wait, what? Start over.
/ We're gonna do pound / cast / Kali.
Okay, there we go. So we're gonna have everyone try this real quick. It might burn the server down, but it might not. We'll see. So try hitting that address. If you are on Discord, I'll show you guys that in a minute.
Are you on guest or are you on members?
So this should spin up a Kali instance for you.
You hit 445 on that server. Make sure that you hit it. I just had it. No,
Okay, so
on the share.
HTTPS.
Oh, 213, by the way. That's 213.
Oh,
The Samba. There you go.
okay. Let's see if that works.
S&D : just like.
48.
Okay, and we're missing is
You can also use SMB.
You should be able to toss it over there.
48.
And then how do we forward slash?
Chad.
Yeah.
We're missing a zip file in that share.
100.
Yeah, let me give me a second.
Okay, cool. So it looks like the Samba share is working too. So
Cool. Yeah, I just added the rules, so you should be good.
okay, so if you have Chasm in the browser working, you can ignore the next few steps. But I'm going to go ahead and let's see. Does everyone have this information down if you're trying to grab it?
/cast.
Anyone else need files?
Anyone else need files? Because it's really important that you work along with us. That's kind of the goal here. Okay, so let's.
They'll be up here in the
I
corner.
I made a little video because I didn't want to deal with trying to set them both up at the same time here.
Kelly.
This is C.
There we go. Alright, zip file's coming down. It's not
Okay.
ready yet, though.
So I'm going to show this video. Who here has VMware installed? Okay, so this video is going to show you how to set it up on VMware, what we want to do. So the first step is going to be taking that 7-zip file and extracting it. So I just go through and extract that. And then I take this zip file here and I start that extraction as well, the metasploitable-linux.zip. And these steps are the same for both VMware and VirtualBox. So let's see if I can skip through it actually extracting. Perfect. Okay, so then you'll have those two folders. So you'll come to VMware, you'll hit, wow, I went really fast.
SMB, we need to do SMB. Just two.
You'll hit open a virtual machine.
SMB.
And then we're going to go through and select one of those that we did. So I select Metasploitable, and then you're looking for that .vmx file. And it should create up here a new Metasploitable image that gets imported. So once Metasploitable is imported, we're going to go through and create another VM by opening, and then we select Kali Linux, and then it should have in here the last VMware.
Okay, you can install.
And that will import that. So at the end of this, you should have both of these set up, both Metasploitable 2 and Kali Linux. Then what we're going to go through and do is create a custom network. So you come up here to the Edit, Virtual Network Editor. And so that takes a minute. And so then you get this little virtual network editor, and then you've got to come down to the bottom where it says Change Settings.
All three should be on.
Just so make sure, because otherwise it prompts for admin permissions to change it. And then we're going to go through and create a new network. And I just select one of these VM nets that's not used. And you can see what's used because it shows you right there. You've got those ones there. And then I went through and renamed it. So I click Rename Network, and I'm renaming it to Metasploitable 2. And then you need to make sure that it says use local DHCP service. That's super important. So once we've created this second network, then what we're going to do is we're going to tie the two VMs together onto this private network within VMware. So I go to Metasploitable 2, and I see how there's two network adapters. I'm just going to remove one of them because we only need one. And then I'm going to come in here, click on it, and then select Custom. So we're going to select a specific network, and then we're going to choose the one that we renamed, which is renamed to Metasploitable 2. So then we come to the Kali image, and we edit it, and there's only one network adapter. So with this one, since we want to still access the internet, we're just going to add a second network adapter. So you go to add, and then add a new network adapter, and then again select custom, and then choose the Metasploitable network. So there should be 2 networks now. The one that was made by default, which is the NAT, and then a second one, which is custom, which is for Metasploitable 2. So then you can go ahead and power them both on, and it will ask you if you copied it or moved it. Just say that you moved it. So I started Metasploit, and then you come to the Kali Linux one, and I power that one on as well. So they're both booting, and you make sure you select move it for that one. And we just wait. So we'll wait for them both to boot, and it takes a minute.
All the files are on the SMP share now too.
Okay. So one of the issues that I found with VMware is so you'll see it was that when Kali booted for me the first few times, it wouldn't let me type, and I fixed that by rebooting the Kali image.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure that.
Okay, so while Kali was rebooting, you log into the Metasploitable by typing MSF admin. Just the creds are right there on the front. And then you're going to do an IPA, and you're going to look for the IP address. And that will tell you. So you guys are probably way behind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post this video in Discord so that you can download it real quick and just catch up while I work with everybody else. So let me do that really fast. I'm going to just dump it in the voice text channel. And then I'm also going to dump the VirtualBox one in too. Okay, so you can grab those videos and just like follow along where you're stuck. But we want to get these 2 set up. So I'm going to go through virtual. Who here is using VirtualBox? You're using VirtualBox. Do you want me to go through the setup on this? No? Okay, so it's the same idea. All you're doing is creating a network share. Sorry, not creating. You're creating a private network, and then you're connecting the 2 boxes with that private network, and then you should be good. So, yeah, that's that. Who needs help setting this up? Okay, who has a VM set up with Kali and a VM set up with Metasploitable?
I could
Okay,
use
one.
networking.
Okay, you need help with networking. Are you on VMware?
Yeah.
All right, so let's just take a few minutes and let's walk around and get this set up.
So I've got my Kali box up, and I've got my Metasploit.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
So did you do the networking too?
No.
Okay, so you need to shut them down, and hopefully we're still okay.
Yeah.
Because we only have 4. We will do that in a minute.
There's no way that they'll pop them all.
Okay.
I think we're good to use them.
Okay. Well, do we have Kali then?
No, that's the more important target.
Yeah, I would say just everyone gets Kali, and then they can target those.
Kali
Unless they
and
already
then a
have
burst
Metasploit,
adapter.
then they can attack.
Okay. All right. So does anyone have any concerns with that?
I think we're good on it.
Okay.
Honestly.
All right. So I realize that we're going to have an issue with Chasm that we're not going to have with a VM. So the thing that they brought up is we have some versions of Metasploitable running here on the network. So these are those IPs. We have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes. So we will all of us in this class will attack these, while everyone at Discord can follow those videos and set them up themselves and attack their own machines. And those guides should help. But what we do need to do is we need to have Kali set up, and we need to have it set up correctly if we're going to be attacking the stuff here. Now the reason we need to do this is because of the listener section of Metasploit, and I'll talk about that later. But the gist of it is your Kali machine needs to have an accessible IP with an open port so that the payload can come back and talk to your machine. So when we did this, we did it as a NAT because we were going to have the 2 machines talk on that internal network. If we're going to attack something on our network here, NAT's not going to work for us. we're going to need to switch it to be a bridged network instead.
Yeah, if you're using VirtualBox, I can help you.
Yeah, and so you need, with VMware, it's just here. You do it this way. With VirtualBox,
It's very similar.
it's very, very similar. It's not bad. So, and if you're stuck, there's plenty of people that can help you. So we need to switch it to be a bridge network, and then we can spin up Kali. So I've shown you this. Now I'm just going to sit and do stuff in front of everyone, and we'll have exercises at the end where people can actually do it themselves. You can work on getting this set up during this section while I'm talking, or afterwards. I'd love to sit and help you guys. So let's let Kali boot. All right. Oh geez. So fun tidbit about me. I don't type in the normal keyboard layout. I use a layout called Dvorak, and it drives me mad. Okay, it's set KB. So I can, okay, set XKB. So I can't hardly type it. There we go. Until I'm in the right layout. Now let's see if I can make this bigger. View full screen. Okay, and then no. Okay, let's see if I can change the size. Here we go.
What is the quickest Metasploit?
Take a look. Okay. Is that big enough? Can we read this? Or is that too, or do we need more? Let's give it a little more. Wow. 20. How about that? Is that big enough? Yes, no? More, less? That works?
Big enough that I can read it on the preview.
Okay, cool. All right, so we're going to just set up Metasploit. So let me pull up my notes real quick just to make sure I'm not doing it wrong. Nope. Okay, so I have this command here. So this is usually, yeah, this is perfect. So for the first time you run Metasploit, you kind of need to set up the database and initialize it. So Metasploit uses a Postgres database, and so in Kali it's installed by default. So we're just going to start it, and then we're going to use this msfdb init command. And what that will go through and do is it will download stuff from the Metasploit repository and just initialize your database. But I cannot just run it like that. We need to run it as root because Metasploit wants you to run as root. If you don't know, if you've never used Kali and this is your first time setting it up, the username is Kali and the password is also Kali, K-A-L-I. So now to go to root, I'm doing sudo su. So to switch to the root user. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste this command. So I'm going to start Postgres using systemd with the service command, and then I'm going to initialize the database. Here, let me turn the light off, since we're doing a lot more black terminal, white screen stuff.
You should post that in that command in Discord as well.
Post that in Discord? Okay.
Okay, I'm glad I changed that.
So the next one, here, let's see if I can actually just take my notes and put them here on the left. And we'll put the VM on the right.
See if I could log in.
Perfect. So here we have my notes. Okay, so we're going to do MSF console to bring up the console for Metasploit. So well, let's give it a bit. It's not super fast to start for the first time. Perfect. Ooh, darn it. Well, there's a really cool picture that it usually does, but we've changed the screen size so we don't get to see the fancy missile command picture. So this is Metasploit, and this is the console. You just get this MSF6. A lot of my commands, I think, are saying MSF5. And we can pull up the help menu. And the help menu is huge and goes over all kinds of stuff. And honestly, what I would do your first time using Metasploit is just sit there at this help menu, maybe copy and paste it to something that's a little more readable if the size isn't right, and just read through what it has here. You've got all the different commands that it's got. It'll talk to you about the different modules that it has and the commands that are available, and it's really good to spend 10 minutes and just read through it and understand the capabilities that it has, even if you don't quite know what you're doing yet. So this is how you pull up the console. So let's see if I can. Let's go back to our slides. So yes. So let's talk about intelligence gathering. So with intelligence gathering, this is this first section of Metasploit that's super important. It's we need to let's say we have a host, and I showed you guys these IPs. So we have these IP addresses, and we want to know more about them, right? We want, what do they do? What can we figure out? And there's two ways of doing intelligence gathering. So we have our passive gathering, and we have our active gathering. Now, passive gathering is us trying to get information about this host without actually talking to the machine. We don't want them to. We don't want to communicate with the host. We just want to figure out as much as we can. And so I've written some things here. An example would be doing a whois command on an IP or a domain, and this will kind of give you some information. So let's give it a shot. So within Metasploit, we can just do whois, and we can do, well, what's a website everyone likes? 801labs.org. Let's figure out some information about it. I love this. It's a great idea about ourselves. So we'll run whois, and it's not running. I wonder what's going on. So I hit Control-C because it wasn't working. Now I'm going to open up a new tab, and let's do a dig of 801labs.org. So this is outside of Metasploit. I'm still not getting it. Looks like I don't have internet. That would be important. So I'm going to look at my IP addresses. Oh, right. I gave Callie 2 network adapters, and Callie by default is doing a DHCP lookup for only one of them. And this is the internal network that I created, right? This ETH0, which was the first adapter that we're bridging, it's not doing anything. So I'm just going to do sudo dh client ETH0. And I'm going to basically say, hey, please give me an IP. Now I've got an IP, we can see there. So let's go back and run our command. Okay, cool. So I'm going to scroll up. We have a lot of information about the host. We see that the domain is hosted through GoDaddy. Well, that's the registrar. And we can see that we have turned on privacy. So there's not much there other than we know one thing about this company, this hacker space, is that they do 2 things. One, they register their domain at GoDaddy, and so if we want to call them up and pretend to be GoDaddy,
Use other tools, try like PGP Hurricane.
Yeah. So you're mentioning a lot of tools. Yeah. We're not going to dig too much into this section. We're going to focus on Metasploit. And we can also see that here it's telling us the name servers of the domain. Right? It's Cloudflare. So they're hosting it through Cloudflare. So let's do another one. Dig And so we can type the dig command in here. I want to make this a little bit bigger. Oh, I can do it. There we go. And we can see some IP addresses for these. Right? And so these are the IP addresses that the domain is resolving to. And so these are some of the passive tools that Metasploit has available to you. So we can continue to look at them, but let's get a little bit more excited. So we have the active intelligence gathering. This is the more fun stuff where we're going to actually send traffic to and from a host. So with this active intelligence gathering, the way that Metasploit has done it is they have made a bunch of modules. And anyone can build a module. In fact, part 2 of this workshop from Santiago is actually going through and talking about how to build a module, because once you really start using Metasploit, you're going to want to build your own and get your own tools in there, and that's where the power of Metasploit comes in. But we're going to use modules for this active, and we have this awesome ability to search. So let's do search, and we can search for basically anything. Let's see. So you can do search, and we can do, let's do scanning, right? So let's search for scanning, and it will show us all the modules that they have. Okay, I gotta fix this. I gotta change the resolution just a tad bit. View. Let's pull back up. Because it is breaking Metasploit. Okay, let's try that. Okay, here we go. So we've got here some of the modules when we search scanning that it came up with. It came up with an auxiliary tool for scanning for CCTV DVRs. It's got one that's using a GPT echoing. It's using, all these different tools that are available to us. It's just pivot, looking for a squid server. This is everything. There's so many modules in stock Metasploit. So let's say we wanted to use one of these. So I'm gonna actually search for just the word scan, because that's a little bit less crazy. And you can see we have a ton more here. So let's see if I can find a really good one.
There was one that said TCP port scan.
Wow, let's search for port scan. Port. Right, and so here we've got a bunch of port scanners. So here we are with TCP port scanner. So let's use this one. So the way we use a module is we actually type the use here. Let's see. We'll type the use command, and then we'll paste the full name of the module, which is in this case auxiliary scanner port scan TCP, and then we hit enter. And you can see what module we're in because it puts it right there. And then we need to find more information about this module. So type show options, and it will show us the options that we have to configure this module with. This one looks like it has the number of concurrent ports. So it says it's gonna scan 10 at a time. There's a delay. We can add a delay in between. There's a jitter, which is, I don't know, it's a jitter. So
It says on it.
the delay jitter factor.
So that way you can have some of your scans not be every
Oh yes,
exactly.
exactly. It's not. It's a little bit random is how much. Yep. Then you've got your ports that it's going to scan, and so by default it sets a bunch of stuff in here, and it's going to tell you here whether they're required or not, because some options won't be required and some will. Question.
I'm kind of late for this, but I noticed you copied and pasted the entire scanner's directory.
Yep.
You could have just used the number.
I could have just used the number he's saying. So he's talking about this number, and you sure can.
That's what I do personally.
For me, I don't remember the numbers, and a lot of times, here I'll show you. This is actually a cool trick. So if we do use, we can do auxiliary, and I see how I hit tab there, and I can hit tab a bunch, and it's gonna there's a lot of possibilities. I can do port. Let's see. I can do scanner, and I can look in this scanner folder. This is another way of trying to browse what's available, and go, yes, I want to see all the scanners. And you can look through them, right? So we want to do port scanner. So if I hit tab, it's going to show me port scan, and it'll show me all the different types of port scans they have. So I like the tab complete because a lot of times I'll just remember that it was an auxiliary scanner and I won't remember much else, and I'll let tab complete help me find it. So that's why I like that over the number, but the number works great and it's a lot better than trying to type the whole thing. Okay, so back to the options. So show options. Now, let's say that when we do our scan, we don't want to scan the first 10,000 ports. We only want to scan the first 1,024, right? So these are most common ones. So what we'll do is we'll do set ports.
You did soft.
Oh, I did. There we go. Set ports.
Is this going to be case sensitive?
Is it case sensitive? I don't know. He says it's not. I've always just capitalized it, but
Just curious.
it might. Well, let's find out. So let's do it first. Ports 1 to 102, right? And then we can click our show options. We can see that changed. Let's try and do it without capitals. Let's do 1025. Yeah, it worked just fine.
It's kind of like SQL.
Yep. So, this one is important, the R hosts. So these are the hosts that we want to scan. You see how it's blank here, but it's a required field. This module will not run without a list of hosts. And so let's pick a host and add it in here. So let's add this one here, just the first one. Let's not all scan this at the same time. Let me do, here, I'll pick the bottom one, but let's not all do it so we don't hammer this host. So I'm going to do set R hosts.
Mr. Ness.
Okay. Show. Right, and so we've set the host that we want to scan, and then we can type run. And so what that will do is it will run the port scan of this host. And we can see it'll show us all the list of the hosts that are open, at least on the TCP side, right? And so we've got, it looks like quite a few open ports on this one. Does anyone recognize what this port is? Port 80. HTTP. So let's pull it up in browser and take a look. So this is a great way to do your active exploitation, is if you see an open port, you do it in port 80, just kind of take a look at what it is. So here it is them showing their little Metasploitable 2 info. We have port, does anyone know what port 21 is? Telnet. That's a fun one, right? And so there's other ports. So here we are in this first page. We're doing this active.
Oh wait, no, Telnet's 23. That's FTP. My bad.
That's FTP3.
I
Yes,
always
you're right.
confuse those two. Every time.
Your quick answer confused me as well.
That's okay.
So we have a lot of ports
23
open.
is open. It's at
Yes,
the top
23
of
is
the list.
open. I knew Telnet was open on this box. I just,
It's okay.
anyways.
I looked up and saw Telnet first, and it's okay.
So we have all these ports open, and we've been able to scan a lot of information. So another interesting thing that Metasploit does is it keeps a running database of hosts that are available to it and what it's been able to figure out, right? And so far, it's taken this host and stored it in the database. It's going to try and figure stuff out about it, and as we do more and we use more advanced tools, we can get this to fill out more and more. It's kind of a good way to keep record. Now, remember how I said that this one was kind of a partial? It's because it doesn't do a great job. Metasploit's version of reconnaissance, of scanning, it's not so awesome, and they're much better tools. So I would very much suggest using those other tools instead, but it is here for you to use. And if you want to start building your own tools, this is a much better platform to use. So that's kind of the intelligence gathering. Let's see. Oh, I skipped. Did I have anything else here for us? I have a SYN scan. Oh, this one is actually really good. So to exit the module, you'll just type back. One of the other tools that I really like is Nmap. Now, I said that Nmap was a better tool. You can actually use Nmap within Metasploit. Just, yeah, right? So we're going to do, well, we don't want to do full port scan. We're just going to do 1 to 1024, and then we're going to give it the IP. And we can run Nmap within Metasploit's console, and that is a much easier to read. Like it's gone through and identified what service is normally on that port. Here we have FTP on port 21, we have Telnet on 23, and just other ports, HTTP for port 80, that are very useful to us. And so, let's see if I can. So, and it even tells us that this is a virtual box NIC. So Nmap is really good, right? And we can use that here within Metasploit too.
Is there
Go ahead.
Is there anything besides Nmap that's gonna let you do a lot of like service enumeration stuff like that?
So you're asking about service enumeration. That's when we start getting into some other tools, like a lot of automated vulnerability analysis tools. One of the free ones that you can use is Nessus. Is a really good tool. Let's see. I know that Rapid7 has their own tools. Those ones I believe are paid. Honestly, most of us will be using Nmap for a lot of our stuff, just because we're at that level. Once you start getting into those other tools, it's a lot more automated. It's a lot more enterprisey, and costs money. So let's say that we have identified these ports, and well, let's go through some more. Let's do an actual scan. So we're gonna do a SYN scan with Telnet with Metasploit. I'm gonna do show options. Does anyone have any questions on what I'm doing or how it works? Set our hosts. Okay, no questions so far. Any questions on Discord?
No, none have come in.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna run. I like this SYN scan because it's actually pretty fast. Because it's just looking for a response back. So we'll let that run. Well, I don't know if I want to wait that whole time. We're not going to wait the whole time. So one tidbit is this box has VNC open and has MySQL. So I believe. Actually, let me check. Let's just do a quick.
Does not work. Watch does not work.
Yeah, there we go. So I'm not going to do a full scan because it takes time, but I know that this box has MySQL open. But we want to do more intelligence gathering on this port. We want to know more than just what Nmap is telling us here. Now, Nmap has some cool things. They'll do service detect and can do a lot of stuff that we're going to do with Metasploit instead. But I want to focus on Metasploit. So there is a module in here for scanning, of course, MySQL. So the way that we could find that is search MySQL scan. And so we can see that they have a bunch of stuff in this auxiliary scanner MySQL folder. So let's just go into that folder and see. Actually, this one's perfect. Auxiliary scanner MySQL version. So we're just going to use that one and then show options. So set our hosts. Okay, let's make sure this is big. This is looking funny.
It's because you changed it to stretch fit.
And then run. What? Oh my gosh, I did the wrong R hosts. Supposed to put an IP there. Copy. Paste. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
So if I run that, this scanner lets us scan, and it tells us the exact version of MySQL, which is super useful because if we want to exploit this box, we could take this specific version number. I'm going to show you a cool website. This is also, let's pull it up. So it's called ExploitDB, and I love this one. But we can pipe in. Let's erase that. We can pipe in MySQL and we can start looking at the available vulnerabilities that we have for it. And there's 11 pages of this. So this is probably one of my favorite ones, but searching ExploitDB is such a pain in the butt. I hate it so much. So a lot of the times, CVE database. So a lot of times what I like to do is come to the MITRE's CVE database, and I'll just type MySQL into it. And I can look at this specific product, MySQL, and I can see, what dates they were published and what vulnerabilities might be available to us. And so one of the things that we can do is we can say, we'll get into that later. The other one you can do is you can just type the specific version in and see if there are any vulnerabilities available. And specifically, we know that this one has a vulnerability for it, and here's our CVE number from 2007. So I'm going to grab this actual CVE and see if I can dump it into ExploitDB. I don't know if ExploitDB has it. So this is for PHP extensions. So here's a database vulnerability for it. Kind of not what I'm looking to exploit, but you can kind of get the idea that doing this kind of searching and knowing version numbers allows you to do a lot of this vulnerability scanning and this reconnaissance. I have a bunch of other modules here that I like a lot. I'm just going to copy and paste these into Discord. We're not going to go through every single one of them. But you can look at those a bit later. But that's kind of the active and the passive scanning. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay, cool. So let's get past that and let's look at the actual vulnerability analysis. There's some cool ones in here that we have. I've got a thing for using the module for SMB login. That one's a great one that will try and brute force SMB login. There's one for looking for VNC authentication that has no auth, looking for open X11 servers. Go ahead.
There is a question from Discord. Is there a benefit to using Metasploit over Nmap? Seems clunky comparatively.
So the question is, in that intelligence gathering section, is Nmap or Metasploit? Well, that's why I put Metasploit as a partial, because I think it's not the right tool to do it with. I don't think it's as good as Nmap. I think Nmap's way better, but it's there.
The best port scanner.
Yeah, Nmap is.
If you want to brute force scan stuff, and Nmap is the tool.
Now, if you really want to get into brute force scan stuff, let's see if I have it here. Metasploit is technically is way slow. So this is the speed here. Let me pull if I can pull this up in a bigger screen for you. So we did some. Oh no, I don't want to. Okay, so we did some speed testing on the difference between the tools, and I think when I did Nmap in Metasploit, or when it was 1.4, and Nmap by itself was 1.45. I think that was just a glitch in the matrix. So they're about the same, but everything else is way slower. Masscan is 2 seconds, and Metasploit by itself, depending on the module, is almost a minute. So yes, your question about, or your statement of Nmap being the best, Nmap is my favorite too. So there's that. The speed comparisons, that's kind of fun. So vulnerability analysis. Do you guys want me to get into more about some of these modules, or do we just want to go straight into running some things and hacking some boxes?
With my knowledge of vulnerability analysis, Nmap has a partial in that section.
Yep. No, Nmap. I did not put Nmap as partial.
Yeah, but with my understanding, it should be.
With vulnerability analysis?
Threat modeling.
Yeah, I've got that as partial. You're right.
I meant threat modeling.
Threat modeling is a different thing. We can get into that a bit later. That's more about like figuring out what threats a company has against them. Like, is there like specific group that's targeting them, things like that. Okay, so let's go straight into the exploitation because that's the fun. So we've been in the auxiliary section. This is the fun part, the exploit section. So I typed show exploits. I didn't really talk too much about the show command. So we've got the show exploits. We've got the show auxiliary. We can do show auxiliary, right? And it'll just show you all the stuff in those different categories. So if we do show exploits, we can see all the different exploits available to us. Let's try. So I'm going to give you an exploit that I know that works. I'm not going to make you do the scanning. We're going to do this Postgres payload. So I know that they're running Postgres, and that it's available to us, and it's and it's vulnerable. So we're going to use Metasploit to hack this box. So to use a module, it's the use command. Then we do exploit. And then this is really kind of important. So after exploit, it separates them into sections. So I don't know if you see here, but we've got Windows. And it's separating them into operating systems. So with this, we know our server's a Linux box. And then after this folder, it's going to go to the service. So we're targeting a Postgres service. And so I can hit tab to complete it. And there's only one module for Postgres in Metasploit. So I'm going to use that module, the exploit Linux Postgres payload module. Right. So the next thing is we've got our, remember the analogy I did of a needle? We've got our needle. This is our exploit. Now we need an actual payload to give it. So we can do show payloads, which is another folder, and we can choose what payload to give. That's what's gonna happen once the box is attacked. So let's see. If I do a show options in this one, scroll up. You can see that by default it has a payload selected. This is Linux, x86, Meterpreter, reverse TCP. Now, the host that we're attacking is, if we were to do more reconnaissance, we'd find out this is not an x86 box, but it's an x64 box. So let's quickly fix that. So set payload, and then we want to give it Linux. Oh, it's only going to give us x86. We should be fine with this. We want a shell, a reverse shell. I'm going to set that, and we can do show options. And we can see here that we've got some default options. Some of them are required, some of them aren't. Specifically, let's set the R host again.
And the L host.
We'll get to that in a second. Set R host. Right, and so that's the box we're going to attack. So we've set that here. And then he mentioned that we needed an L host. So what we really need to do is we need to come into the payload options. So we were looking at the module options. Now let's look at the payload options. And the payload requires that we set an L host and an L port. Now an L host is the listener. L for listener, R for remote. So that's us. We need to figure out what our IP is so that it can connect back. And so we did an IPA, remember when we got our DHCP? So I'm going to grab the IP from this host, and I'm going to set it here, set L host, and then I can do show targets, and we're going to select target 0, and we're going to run. And let's see what happens. Okay, and so it ran. So the exploit, that's all you do. You hit run, and it exploits the server, and then it gives us some interpreter session, except I think somebody else just ran it on me. Are you guys using a different IP? Please be using a different IP. This one's mine. Actually, you know what I'll do? I'll spin up my own.
And then Metasploit does the heavy lifting.
So somebody else stole my interpreter session, and it's not very nice because it's ruining my class. You know who you are.
I did not steal anything.
Uh-huh.
Let me just be clear, I killed the process that you were running. It's not stealing, it is preventing of theft.
Okay.
There's not a team back here working against you.
Looks like we have a bunch of people already on the box killing my crap. This is what I do when we have a class with a bunch of hackers.
We're sorry.
No, you're not. So I'm going to learn, and I'm going to do my own internal box instead.
Oh man, it shouldn't be like that.
Don't be like
Set
that.
that internal box to bridged.
I don't need to, because I already have the internal net. Here, I'll show you. So I'm going to, instead of using this Ethernet device, I'm going to switch to this one.
I know. The joke was that you then make it public so they can get into it too.
No. Okay.
You didn't need to show me. I thought
Okay, so set our host.
I reacted based on what I saw every time we did an extra idea.
Oh, it's not going to work. So, do you see how I ran this? And it's just kind of sitting here and trying to clean it. It says exploit completed, but no session created. This is actually really important to see because what it's saying is that you successfully exploited the server, but nothing talked back to your listener. That's a problem. So the reason that nothing talked back to the listener is because I need to set the correct L host. But that's kind of what that error means when you see it. There we go. So now I'm going to go ahead and run it again. The nice part about this vulnerability is that
I think that it needed to be 9, not 129, not 128.
I think you're right. I think I put the wrong port again. 12 IP.
No, because they just
It's still not running. That's interesting. I wonder. Oh, here we are. Nope. Interpreter session 3 opened. So this is kind of one of the fun things about these payloads. Is they're never perfect. Go away. So I'm going to reboot that interpreter box. In the meantime, please don't kill my session while I'm trying to teach the class. You would never. Of course you wouldn't. Our host. Now nothing's running. Okay. So I actually have noticed this with Meterpreter before, but if you start getting too many failed logins and failed sessions, you just kind of have to kill it and restart. There's a better way to kill it. I always forget what it is though. So I just use the exit command. So I'm just gonna I'm using the up arrow to look at my previous commands. See if this is finished. Yep, that's come back up. And so it'll make it really easy for me to redo everything that I've done before. So set lhost.
That's
Let's check, make sure. 129, yes, that is correct. And then I need to set the target, and then let's just do run. Okay, there we go. So here we have a Meterpreter. So I want to talk a little about Meterpreter and what Meterpreter is. It's really great. I freaking love Meterpreter. So what Meterpreter, it's kind of like a post-exploitation toolkit. So let's see, do I have anything else here? I have another payload here that you can use on this box. I'm just going to dump it into Discord real quick. There we go. So you guys can play with this other payload, but I'm going to switch into this post-exploitation section. And there's two parts to this that I really like, and that Metasploit does quite well. It's got Meterpreter, and there's a few other things like just a normal reverse shell. And then it's actually got some modules for doing privilege escalation. So I want to talk about how the exploit worked that we just did and dig into it a little bit. So what happens is this attacking system is your Metasploit box. And it creates this circle, this port here. And it's the listening port. And so you send an attack to the listening port on your target. So we set it to the Postgres box, the Postgres port, and we sent the payload here. And it did the exploit and set the payload. And then once that's done, this kind of section disappears. You're not really doing communication over there anymore. What you're doing instead, because we set a payload of a reverse shell, is this target, so this Metasploitable box is talking back to us on our listening port. And so with Metasploit, I set it, let's see, my listening port was 444, I believe, is the default. Yeah, 4444. And so that's what it's listening on. And so that's kind of how this process works a lot of the times. You send an attack, and then you have something on your machine that's listening. And so a lot of people will set up listeners, and you can do some really cool things where it'll proxy traffic back to your machine, and you can do all kinds of listeners so that the attacking machine and the listening IP are different. But that's a little bit more advanced.
So what protocol does the shell use? Is it a SSH shell or is it a custom Metasploit thing?
So Meterpreter is not a shell or a way to talk back. It's a way of doing commands. So when we did our payload, let's see if I can pull this up. I'm going to do exit, right? And so it closed, but we chose, we said, let's see if I can pull it up.
You can type history.
Here we are. Set payload. Linux x86 reverse TCP.
Right.
So it is using a reverse TCP connection to do that. And there's a bunch of other options that we can do. We have tons of these options.
So I'm curious what the layer is above TCP. Is it Telnet? Is it SSH?
If you throw up where, sorry.
It's basically just raw text. It's like telling.
Yeah, it's just
I think they started moving to encrypted communications, but I don't think it's SSH. So
I guess Metasploit has some built-in command to connect to that.
Mhm.
If you wanted to just connect to, an attacking computer that's running one of these.
yes, exactly. You could. So you could, in fact, someone could start setting. That'd be a really interesting thing. Could start sending a lot of connections to an interpreter, and it would open up a bunch of different sessions. I don't know if you saw during that troubleshooting, it said session 1, session 2, session 5 opened an interpreter. It's because I had set it up to listen for multiple sessions. But yeah, it has a bunch of these different types, and this is where people start building their own payloads, because they will build in their and some of them you can do encrypted as well. And so you could, I mean, the best way is because a lot of these ones are kind of old, and network monitoring tools will pick them up in a second. So a lot of real pen testing teams will take these modules, use them as kind of a guide, and then build their own reverse connection and just use that on all of their engagements instead, so that they don't get detected as quickly. So what was I going to talk about? Oh, we're in that interpreter section. So let's go ahead and just repop it. How cool is that? I can just type the run command and repop the box over and over again. So Meterpreter has all of these lovely commands that are available to us, and the way it's cross-platform, so that if you're attacking a Windows box or a Linux box or even a Mac box, I believe. It's been a while since I played against attacking a Mac server. Yeah, right. These commands will try and run across them. So if I do, if I do a dir command, right? So dir does not work on Windows. Sorry, on Linux. It's not a command, but it does run on Windows. So when I type dir, it's going to be smart enough to say, oh, I'm on a Linux host, I should run ls instead and get basically the same type of information, right? So, oh, this is interesting. Here's a server.cert and the server.key. So we can do cool things like cat, server.key. And we can look at a private key for the server, which is probably really useful, right? And there's all kinds of fun tools that...
Thank you for your authentication tools.
Yeah, that the interpreter has for us. Like, even if we were on a box with a webcam, that's super fun. You can start viewing the webcam. Let's see, is there a screen? There's a screenshot one in here somewhere. You can upload files to and from the box. Basically everything that you would need to do post-exploit. Another one that I like is sysinfo, which is super useful once you're on the machine to say, oh, this is a Ubuntu 8 server. I don't know if you guys know how old that is, but
that's old.
It's old.
That's at least 20 years old.
Not 20, but
Current release is 22, isn't it?
Current release is 22, so this is
old.
This is old.
Very old.
Should be about 14 years old.
This get UID one kind of tells us what user we're running as. So we're running as a Postgres user because that's the service that we hacked. This is interesting. There's the shell command. So what it'll do is it'll spawn a secondary shell, and I can do who, and just type normal Linux commands. Who am I? And you can see this isn't a great shell, so let's do bin/bash, and I broke it. Not. So normally when you're doing a reverse shell and you do weird stuff like that, you can very much break it. Meterpreter is really good at keeping you from breaking it. That's why I like it so much. So I'm going to hit Control-C, and I get back to the Meterpreter section. And I can continue doing commands. And so this is kind of the Postgres. There's these scripts that we can do.
I'm sorry, could you walk through real quick how? So I got it to talk back to me, but it's not opening up an interpreter still.
So how do you know it's talking back to you?
It's telling me command shell session opened. So
Okay.
maybe it is talking to me in an interpreter. I don't know.
So I don't think it's actually talking back to you.
Okay.
I think that's the problem.
Okay.
So it says that it's opening up a listener basically, but I don't know if it's gotten a callback yet.
Okay.
I can definitely come help you.
So
in a
I
minute.
was able to look at the Postgres folder at one point.
Okay.
When I ls, I see like PG version, base, global, PG clog, PG multi.
Well, then it looks like you're in.
I think you just don't have the interpreter shell.
Right. So
Oh, so you have a
that's what I'm
shell,
asking, how do I
but
get
you
my
don't
shell?
have an interpreter. Okay.
You might have picked a different payload.
Mhm.
And so if you pick the payload that's just a reverse shell, you'll just get a reverse shell without an
Okay.
interpreter.
Yeah, you could also try,
Okay,
there's
that's
modules to try to upgrade a just basic shell like that up to a interpreter, so you could try to find one of those modules and then load it and then give it that session right here. So
Yeah.
this is like session 1, and then give it that as an argument and then try that. Your mileage may vary.
Yes. So once we're in, and since we have an interpreter, we can run some modules in here. And so the modules for these are in the post folder. So we're gonna do post, Linux, and then we have a bunch of different options available to us. We can dig through those later. I'm just gonna do the gather, and I like the check VM one because in this case it should show up as a VMware machine because it's running on my box, right? As a VMware virtual machine, and it's able to know that, which is really kind of exciting. Let's look at another one.
Wouldn't that also mean that you boxed into something that's a trap?
Yeah. No, a lot of companies will run their stuff on VMware. Like VMware ESXi is super popular, right? For running servers. So this one's interesting. Enum. Oh, I gotta do gather. Enum network. So a lot of machines, once you get in, you want to enumerate the local network. And so this one failed. Not sure why. But it failed. So that didn't work. And so we can just keep through it and trying a bunch of these different tools system. The reason that one probably didn't work is probably because I don't have privileges to run that command as the Postgres user, right? So this command that I just did, enum system, is looking for different stuff on the actual box, and so it's run a script that's gone through and got a ton of information. It's tried to collect cron jobs, log files, looking for CPU vulnerabilities, looking at the user accounts, all this kind of awesome stuff. So let's pop into the privilege escalation. So we want to keep this interpreter session running. We want it available to us. So I'm going to type the background command, and that throws that interpreter session into the background. Then we want to try and use a exploit module that's come over like a post exploit module, but we're going to try and elevate our privileges. So the one that I have tested here, that I know works on this box, is this Linux local glibc. Let me make sure I'm getting the right one. Yeah, LD audit local privilege. Okay, and then we're gonna do show options, and it's gonna ask. The only required thing is a session, and that's the session that we want to run it on. So let's go look at when we backgrounded it. It backgrounded to session 2. So we're gonna do set session 2, and then we're going to, of course, set a payload. Set, and this is what you want to pay attention to. Payload Linux x86 interpreter, and then I think the one that I tested, I want to make sure I know the same one, is reverse TCP. So because I'm setting the payload to be straight up interpreter, I'm going to get an interpreter shell.
Okay. And so I ended up doing that, and I assume got in with an interpreter.
Yeah. And so what I'm doing is I'm saying this payload, go run it on the other interpreter session that you have that's running as the Postgres server, and then give me a second session if it works. So we'll have two sessions. We'll have our lower privileged session and our higher privileged session. And type run, and let's see if it works. So it says that it's vulnerable, and it says session 3 opened. No. We're still waiting.
Why is it showing you the bytes?
So this is a kernel vulnerability that it's exploiting, or rather glibc. So it's just writing a bunch of stuff to here. I don't really know much about this vulnerability. I just used it. Isn't that the beauty of Metasploit?
Different modules will have different debug stuff that can sometimes be helpful if something fails. You might be able to do some research and get an idea of why, or look through the module and see what it's outputting when.
And a lot of times they will fail. Okay, so here we are with the interpreter. And so, help. sysinfo. There we go. So you can see the sysinfo is the same, and then I want to type in get UID. So we're still as Postgres. So that's fun.
That's start capturing audio stream for the target mic.
Yeah, right? And so I think our payload failed here. Exit. So let's see, is there anything else that's useful here?
So, stupid question. You said set session 2, but when you walked in, it said session 3.
So the payload started a third session and supposedly set the root one on that third session.
And the first session is dead now, but that was what you used to get in originally?
I think the first session is still session 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I exited it.
Okay.
Right. So let's
Oh,
see.
yeah. Okay.
So what's the point of opening 2 sessions at the same time?
So what it was is that module takes a session, runs all the commands to get a new session as root. It's a privilege escalation payload.
So I'm going to run it again.
It can also be nice to have if you have if you're fiddling around doing things you're concerned you might do something down the crash your session. Right. So if it's this was fairly
No,
easy
it's
to get
just how the
permission, right?
typo, it's how the payload works.
I would assume, yeah, just because you risk killing a session, and then if it doesn't work, you've lost both sessions, would be my guess.
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah.
And so if you've got 2, then you can just spin off of them.
So just so you know, a lot of these vulnerabilities are glitchy. Like that's the nature of the beast. So it looks like this vulnerability failed. I would probably want to reboot the box or wait for someone to reboot it and run it again if I was an attacker. Sucks, but it is what it is. And now I'm not able to get a new session. It could be because I've done something wrong. Could be something else. I'm not going to sit here and play with it. But we could get root. We could do things like dump password hashes and all kinds of stuff. But that's kind of the gist of it. Now, we kind of have a feel for what is Metasploit. So the question I want to ask you guys is, what is Metasploit?
It's a framework.
It's a framework.
Identify and verify vulnerabilities.
Identify and verify vulnerabilities. And
Also use
go ahead.
Also use the vulnerabilities.
And use them, exactly. Because what's the point of trying to do a pen test or show someone that you're vulnerable with, like if I just say someone, oh, you're running MySQL from 6 years ago, that's a problem. It's got all these vulnerabilities. Like, is someone really going to care? Or if you say, hey, I have all your customers' databases and all their passwords and stuff because it's running, which is going to get more action, right? So using them is super important. Okay, so why should we use Metasploit over something else? Why use Metasploit?
It's the best tool for the job.
I
Because
believe
it's a
you're
useful
right.
tool with pre-made exploitations that you can modify to make exploitations for different versions of software and all that.
Exactly. It's got these modules. You can like use the same payload for different exploits. You can use different exploits with, or the same. You can use the same exploit with a bunch of different payloads. Like you can vice versa. It's really modular. You can have the scanners all in this one toolkit.
The reason why you should use it is so that you don't have to make it yourself.
Exactly.
I was gonna say it's kind of interesting. It's like
why?
An interesting idea of the arms race is like just release weapons of mass destruction to everyone freely, so that like this becomes the standardized thing, and then you have to use it.
Mm-hmm. And you have to. Well, you don't have to use Metasploit. You really don't. You could do it yourself, but you're going to waste so much time. It'd be so much faster just to say, oh, I found this payload, this exploit, just quickly write a module for Metasploit. Now you have everything else you've done before available to you. You have all your previous payloads, all your previous post-exploitation stuff, all in this beautiful toolkit. And I guess the question is, how do we use it? Well, we use that MSF console. It's not hard. We choose our modules, we can do some scanning, we set our options, and we hit the run button and we cross our fingers. That's kind of the way that it works, right? So this is the exercise for you guys to do today. We have them up and running. Why did not hit this one? I hit the Postgres one. There is an FTP service running on this box on port 21. And I want you to answer these 6 questions. Do these 6 things. Find the program name, find an exploit, set it up using the set options, execute it, and then get root, right? And identify the user and get root. So you will have to go through all of these, you will have to figure out which vulnerability to use, figure out how to exploit it, and then figure out how to do a privilege escalation. And so all of that should be pretty fun. The IPs that we have available are these 4, but there's a lot of us here, so we might be trouncing on each other. So if you got it set up on your own while I was jabbering on for an hour and 30 minutes, you can attack your own host within VMware. And I'm pretty sure that's all I have for you, so thank you guys. Because I have a cheat sheet that I use all the time. You're saying session-i?
Sessions-i.
Okay.
So dash interact, and then the session number. So you can do like sessions list.
So we've got this sessions command, and you can interact and select to use the supplied session. So you can do sessions-i, and then we can do session 3 or 2, right? We do get UID. Right, and so we can get back to that session. We can throw that back in the background. Cool. Any other questions? Nope, I am not seeing any questions here. Thank you so much. Let's do the exercise.